So welcome back to Everything Marketplaces. We talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So this is episode 51, and I'm excited to welcome on a very special guest to join us today with Rob Chesnut, who's formerly General Counsel and Chief Ethics Officer at Airbnb. So prior to Airbnb, Rob was also at Chegg and eBay, so he has quite the incredible marketplace experience. He's also the author of the book Intentional Integrity that he recently published, which is a great read and one that I recommend to all founders. So Rob, welcome to the group chat. And wow, what a real treat it is to have you join us here today. I'm really excited to chat with you about some specific topics like ethics with marketplaces. But before we dive into things, maybe you can start off by sharing a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you, and then what led you to marketplaces like eBay.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't start off in marketplaces. I started off in a very different career path. I was a federal prosecutor in Virginia for a number of years. Drug dealers, bank robbers. I did a number of espionage cases. But I think putting people in jail, I found was not the most rewarding. I wanted to feel like I was doing something positive for the world. But when you're putting people in jail, you kind of feel like you're presiding over the end of someone's productive life. But I got really lucky. I ended up there was this little company in my jurisdiction that other prosecutors kept calling me about. And they kept asking questions about this one little company, and I didn't know what this company was. So I figured I had to go out and learn about it. And the name of the company was AOL, America Online. Now, most of you are probably too young. You've never heard of America Online, but in the old days, that was how everybody got onto the internet. So what I did was I went out and they had these discs, and you had to get this disc and stick it into a slot on your computer and plug your phone into the back. And so that's what I did. And so I became an early internet user just because I was lucky enough to have America Online in my jurisdiction. And when I started going and using America Online, one of the sites that I started to use was eBay. And it occurred to me one night that, wow, eBay might be able to use somebody with my background. They got illegal items, they got fraud. So I wrote them a letter. I sent them an email to jobs@ebay.com. They didn't have any job postings available for lawyers, but I figured, what the heck, right? So I sent them my resume and a note to jobs@ebay.com, and there's a phone message for me the next day, and a couple of months later, I'm working for Meg Whitman at this small little company in California. There were only 170 employees back then. So it was a little bit by luck and accident that I ended up in the marketplace world. But I spent 10 years at eBay as a result of it.
Awesome. That's quite the story. So especially to look at eBay today. So
yeah, there were 15,000 people at the company when I left. And there were a lot of issues. Meg walked in. I remember Meg came into me my first week and said, "All right, you're in charge of deciding what we can sell on eBay, all around the world. And can you sell wine? Can you sell guns? Can you sell tickets? Can you sell ivory tusk? Up to you. Figure it out." And so it was pretty fascinating. And then later, I ended up starting the trust and safety department at eBay, which was dealing with all of those issues, plus fraud. And back in those days, there was no fraud detection. There were no third-party companies either. We had to build everything on our own to try to detect when somebody was going to try to rip somebody else off on eBay. So it was a challenging but really fun time. And by the time I left, we had 2,000 people working in trust and safety.
Wow. Yeah, I know you shared some, I believe it was code moments in the book with some specific examples at eBay. Could you maybe share one of those kind of stories with us?
Well, I'll give you the first one. And that was, as soon as I started the work, my first week, somebody forwarded me a note from customer support. Someone wrote into eBay and said, "You all are all going to go to jail because you're selling jarts." So, anybody that talked about jail was going to get my attention because I had spent some time around jails and didn't want to go. So I immediately go online and I don't even know what a jart is. So I go online and find out that jarts are these darts, but they're these big darts and these big plastic fins on the end of them. somebody, I think back in the 50s, came up with a brilliant idea that this would be a great kids toy. That kids could take these big plastic thin darts with steel tips on it, and they'd throw them into these plastic circles on the lawn. But kids being kids, of course, they were throwing them in other places besides the circles. They started throwing them at each other. And kids were ending up in hospitals with darts coming out of all parts of their body. And so the Consumer Product Safety Commission banned them. And so I'm thinking, oh, all right, it looks like some idiot, had an old set of jarts somewhere. I better go, make sure we take it down off the website. So I go onto the website. We didn't have one set of jarts on there. We had about 20. And I'm thinking, oh, man. And at that point, I realized we had a much bigger problem than just jarts. eBay was the place where everybody was cleaning out their garage and their attic. And so we had a jarts problem, but we also had a problem with every baby toy, every power tool that had ever been recalled. And what in the world were we going to do faced with that kind of situation? And you know what, I think because I came from the government, I had a trust level that led me to believe that, look, the government would be open if I went to them. So I actually picked up the phone and called the general counsel of the Consumer Product Safety Commission and said, hey, I want to come out and have a meeting with you. And I don't know, but they agreed. I'm sure they had never even heard of eBay at that point, but they said, sure. So I go out and I sit down in a conference room with their general counsel. And I brought with me copies of the JART listings. And I put them across the table and said, here's our problem. And I framed it as our problem, and then it was, look, eBay doesn't want its customers to get hurt. We don't want this stuff sold on the internet. And you, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, don't want it sold on the internet either. But, we each had to do something about it. And I proposed a partnership. And they agreed to it. And we ended up, they worked with us to teach us about the most common recall products. They taught us how to search for them. We gave them free space on eBay where consumers could look up items for themselves. We put up warning notes in different parts of the site. And, look, to this day, the Consumer Product Safety Commission still partners with eBay and works with them on these things. And eBay's never gotten in trouble legally as a result of it, because we weren't worried about how much money are we going to lose by, taking these things off the site. We put our customer first. And I think as a result, we avoided regulatory issues, and I think earned a lot of trust from consumers that, look, our heart's in the right place here. We're concerned about you.
Yeah, that's a really great example. And then maybe kind of a segue, from eBay kind of into Airbnb, which I know many in the group kind of like look up to as earlier stage marketplace founders. How did you kind of think about constructing trust early on at Airbnb?
Well, look, I think Airbnb, eBay was the father of all these. eBay was the first marketplace, really. And at eBay, we built the first trust and safety department. We invented the term trust and safety. We built the first network for person to person. So I think, Airbnb learned from a lot of what was done at eBay, right? And I think, what one learning was, you've got to look at it like stakeholders. In other words, you've got to think bigger than just your bottom line profit number for the week. You got to think a little bit longer term, and you've got to think about doing the right thing by all of your stakeholders. And like Airbnb, investors are stakeholders, but so are your guests, so are your hosts, so are your employees, and really so is the world at large. And we really felt as though we had an obligation to all those different stakeholders. So that meant that, maybe we had to put some friction in place right up front around being a host, that we had to do some checks to make sure the place really existed, right? That we had to be willing to throw a host off the platform if they weren't providing a good experience for our guests. We had to do insurance. I think one of the early learnings was there was a famous case where an Airbnb guest destroyed a host place, stole items, trashed the place. It was awful. And this was in the very early days of Airbnb. And, I think Airbnb's initial reaction was, this is really terrible. We feel awful for the host, but, we're just a platform, right? And the host was angry and wouldn't accept that for an answer. And the bad press started piling up. And it started to hurt Airbnb. Other hosts started wondering, hey, this could happen to me too. And I know Brian was really worried because the company didn't have a lot of money back at that point. But Brian's also really worried about what was going to happen to the business. So Brian actually went to one of the board members and said, look, maybe we should be providing some sort of insurance, like what eBay did in the early days, right? And Brian tentatively said to the board member, maybe we can provide $5,000 worth of insurance. And the board member's response was, add a zero. And actually over time, they've added another zero and then doubled that to $1 million. But, look, back in the early days of a marketplace, $5,000 of insurance was a big step. But you got to do it because that builds trust in the marketplace. And it also means you're going to stand behind your key stakeholders when something goes wrong. The idea that we're only a platform, that was really early thinking back when eBay was first invented. It was something eBay had to abandon. The world's not going to let you say, hey, look, we're only a platform. We're really not responsible. We're just going to collect the money. You got to do more than that.
That's definitely a really great point. I actually wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, which was, I feel like as marketplaces, we kind of have this, unique ability to make an impact, at some sense of scale. And so, along with that, like what sense of responsibilities do we also have?
I don't think the world's going to let you not take responsibility. The world wants you to step up. Look, your logo's on the site. Your color and font, is around the square of the computer. And like it or not, what goes on inside of that square is going to reflect on and define your brand. Look, this is something like that YouTube, Google, Facebook, they're all dealing with right now. This idea of, well, we don't want to judge the content. We're just a platform. They've had to abandon that because, like it or not, what's on your platform defines you. And so, you've got to stand for something. I think every platform needs a North Star. Why do you exist? What are you going to stand for? And that will mean, like it or not, you're going to have to take a stand on something. And I think ultimately that's a good thing. And I'll give you an example. Look, Airbnb, at one point, I had joined as general counsel. We started getting complaints online about discrimination on Airbnb. Users of color having trouble getting a reservation because hosts were turning them down, right? There was even a hashtag, Airbnb while black, and momentum started to build against the company. And we started even lawsuits started coming in. And I remember I went and sat down with Brian Chesky. This was my first big meeting, I think, when I was the general counsel. And I did my research. And I did the research on, what is Airbnb's legal responsibility? Is Airbnb legally responsible if some hosts act this way and do this against our terms of use, right? Are discrimination laws even applicable to something like Airbnb where somebody's renting out a room in their home, right? So I go in and sit down with Brian and I start going through the law. Brian holds up his hand, says, stop, I don't care. I'm like, what do you mean you don't care? And Brian said, look, Rob, Airbnb has a mission, and that mission is to connect human beings from different parts of the world, help people connect as humans, promote immersive travel and a sense of belonging so that we all kind of realize that although we may be from different parts of the world and we may look differently, that we're still all human and we can learn from each other and respect each other. And Brian said, Rob, if this sort of thing is going on Airbnb, we're failing as a company. We're simply failing as a company. So he said, I don't really care what the law says. We're going to fix it. Now you can deal with the legal stuff, but I don't care about what it costs, because this is what we stand for as a company. And then, Airbnb launched a major program to deal with discrimination online. We did a number of things. I remember one thing we did. Brian said, I want everybody on the platform to affirmatively agree that they are not going to discriminate. I want everybody to affirmatively say that we are going to accept everyone, regardless of the color of their skin, their race, their nationality, their religion. And Brian said, I don't care that that's not the law or that it's not required in many places around the world. I don't care. That's what I want. I want people to do it. So we're not going to bury it in the terms of use or anything. We're going to have a screen, and we're going to make people agree to it on that screen, that statement. And if they couldn't agree to it, Brian said, they're gone. I don't care. We lost 1.1% of our users in a month by doing this. Brian said, I don't care. Because frankly, this is what we got to stand for this. And we've done a number of other things, by the way, I think to help promote openness and acceptance and reduce discrimination. And it's been really powerful. And I think, one of the great things about this, I think it's actually good for the business. In other words, I think standing for something, a North Star like that, standing for something you believe in, that you believe is right, is actually a good business move, as well as being the right thing to do. I think in the old days, people used to say, well, it's business, so, we got to do what we got to do here, being nice or doing good. Yeah, okay, great. But this is about money, right? In today's world, the world's changed. The world's not accepting that from business anymore. The world wants businesses to step up and have values. They want businesses to stand for something that's good for the world. Employees want to work for companies that stand for good. And if a business won't do it, the employees they'll talk about it, they'll post about it, they'll blog about it, they'll walk out, they'll quit. Customers will leave too. So the nice thing is you don't have to accept a choice here between doing the right thing and making money. I actually think that they are now parallel, and you not only can do both, but I don't think you can be successful in the long run unless you do both.
No, that's a really great example, and I definitely think that Airbnb, for what I'm seeing, kind of help change that narrative from just being profit driven to standing for something. So maybe what are some ways, just given that we're all earlier stage marketplace founders, and we're probably smaller teams, what are some ways that we can kind of if we've initially kind of constructed our mission, our North Star, what are some ways where we can help ensure and message those values throughout our organization, and then also as a marketplace kind of throughout our community?
I think the first thing you got to do is you got to make sure you've actually articulated a mission. Look, why do you exist? Why are you good for the world? Profit is not purpose. What's your North Star? And you got to define it, and you got to be clear about it right up front. That now's the time to do it, because it's hard to come up with it later. If you define it up front, you will attract employees who believe in that. And they will in turn attract other people to work there who are like that. And you will attract customers who believe in that and who will become powerful spokespeople on your behalf. So you got to define it, you got to be clear about it, and you got to make sure everybody knows about it. And you got to talk about it at every company meeting. You got to define it to the public. What do you stand for? Why are you good for the world? And you got to be proud of it. And now the hard part, you've actually got to make decisions like that's the number one thing, right? you can't say it and then decide, but we got to make money, right? Now, investors are important stakeholders. You got to make money in order to survive, but you can't be so short-term in your thinking that you end up doing things that are contrary to your mission. It doesn't work that way.
Definitely. And then speaking on that kind of note, as far as, decisions, I briefly mentioned this before we started recording the chat, but, I think as early stage marketplaces, we can all remember the first time we had our, first dispute or chargeback through our marketplace. And, we're faced with a very, interesting situation, and we're probably, trying to collect more information from both sides, referencing our terms and our guidelines. And either enforcing or interpreting them, in our best judgment. So this is a very interesting situation that we're in, and kind of also sets a precedent. So I know that you mentioned you advise earlier stage marketplaces. So how do you kind of help walk them through this and kind of think about this?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of bad decisions made on this idea of worrying about a slippery slope or worrying about, quote unquote, setting a precedent. You can try some things, particularly when you're early on. You can try doing the right thing. Doing it once, making a payout once doesn't mean that you're going to commit. You have to do it every time from that point on. But I think you got to work your way through it and learn some things. Think about doing the right thing for your various stakeholders early on. And then I think we were too late, for example, at eBay in doing insurance. People were getting ripped off right and left. And I remember it was a huge step when we finally agreed to start offering insurance. But the first insurance, what the first insurance program was on eBay? First insurance program on eBay was maximum of $200 with a $25 deductible. Think about that. The average selling price of an item on eBay at that point was $40. I mean, talking about tiptoeing your way into it. I mean, how many people are going to fill out an insurance claim for a $40 item with a $25 deductible? But you got to start somewhere. I think we should have gone in earlier and more aggressively. And I think what everyone was very surprised about was it didn't cost as much as everyone feared. And in fact, it wasn't a cost at all. It was a trust builder. It actually drove the business. So I think a way of thinking about these sorts of things is don't be short-sighted. Realize that something like an insurance program, for example, or dispute resolution thing, it actually is an investment in trust. It's an investment in building your business for the long run. And you don't underestimate the power of that. It can move consumers, because everybody's worried. Trust is always an issue in marketplaces, and marketplace businesses are hard. It's not easy. I know some people might think, hey, I'll do a marketplace. I'll just everybody else to do the work, two sides to do the work. I'll just sit back and run the website and make some money. Isn't that easy? Because there are trade-offs. There are multiple stakeholders. There are conflicts. What is the right thing to do? That's not always simple when you've got different stakeholders. You got investors that are on you. You got guests on the one end. You got hosts over here. You got neighbors, who want you to do something different. You got governments who are trying to, they're playing politics. You've got competitors that are trying to make you look bad. It is complicated. However, I think it's really rewarding, and done right, it can be a great business.
Definitely, we can all relate with it being quite complex. So on that note too, I mean, you've worked with some of the most, I believe, kind of legendary founders of marketplaces, over your past experience. So what are some maybe like commonalities or kind of characteristics that stand out that they might share in common that, make them such great leaders and, able to build these great companies such as eBay and Airbnb?
Yeah, you know what, I think a commitment to doing the right thing, having a North Star is a common thing I see with Pierre Omidyar at eBay and Brian Chesky. A lot of people don't know Brian never went to business school. Brian's parents were social workers. he went to design school. Now, Pierre was, like a software developer. Neither one of these folks went to business school. Neither one of them had run a company before by any stretch of the imagination. I think this might have been Brian's first job. But what they had in common was they had a vision of something that was really powerful and really good for the world. And they didn't care that other people didn't see it right away. I mean, Brian got turned down by everybody. Every major venture capital firm in Silicon Valley had a shot at investing in Airbnb in the early days, and nobody did. They were operating on a credit card, and they were on the verge of going under. By the way, same thing with PayPal. PayPal was on the verge of going under. It wasn't easy. But I think what they had in common, I think, is a vision of something that was very good for the world. And they let that be their North Star. And I think they were really persistent and scrappy. Both Pierre and Brian, I think, were not easily discouraged, but driven by something bigger.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think the story about selling the cereal too reinforces the scrappiness for Brian and the team.
There's a saying at Airbnb that they want everyone to be a serial entrepreneur. To be scrappy and think creatively. Think about how you can possibly do something in a way that doesn't cost a fortune and doesn't over-engineer things. And Airbnb is famous for literally what saved the company was during the convention, the Democratic convention in Denver. I don't remember the year at this point. Was it 2008 or 2012? I don't remember, but that they were, in debt, credit cards maxed out. They came up with the idea because they're designers, right? This is what they knew how to do. Designed a really cool cereal boxes. Captain McCain Crunch, and Obama O's. And they designed the boxes. They sold them, I think, like $500 each, stuffed them with Cheerios and Captain Crunch, but they became a hit. Sold them for, I think, $500 each, raised a bunch of money that way, and were able to use that money then to take off. That was kind of the launching point, I think, for the success of the business.
That's awesome. That's a really great story. So we're going to jump in here to questions here in a second. But before we do, so just given that we are kind of earlier stage marketplace founders, I know you and I could kind of talk quite a bit, and me just asking questions. But I wanted to see if there's anything in specific, that you'd like to share with us that might be helpful before we jump into the questions.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to generalize. I've been an advisor to a lot of marketplaces. I've worked at several, Poshmark, Upwork. I've been deeply involved in those two, Turo, and they're always, they're different things. But I think I'll mention the word trust. Trust is at the heart of all these marketplaces. I mean, eBay, it was a big leap of faith back in those days to buy something online from a stranger. Airbnb, a huge leap of faith to actually stay in a stranger's home. Turo, you're giving somebody the keys to your car and letting them drive off with it, right? Upwork, you're paying somebody, a total stranger in a different part of the world, to do work, and you're not there to watch it. Poshmark, it's somebody's clothing. And you have to invest in building trust among strangers. And the success of your marketplace may well depend on how effective are you at trust, because trust is the fundamental currency of human interaction. And trust is at an all-time low in the world. At least like trust in business, trust in media, trust in government, they're at a low. How are you going to build and enable trust? It just doesn't automatically happen. And you got to be thinking about it. And one thing isn't good enough. Like Airbnb will do it multiple ways. Insurance, dispute resolution, reviews, like, Airbnb basically adopted what eBay did with a feedback system and then made it better. But the feedback system was the original trust mechanism on the internet. What are you doing to invest in trust? And you may need to think about it on multiple levels, because one thing typically won't do it. It isn't easy to build trust among strangers in a national or global community.
That's really helpful. Cool. So we're going to do some questions here.
Sure.
Let's see. Hey, Fitz, did you want to jump on?
Yeah. Hi, Rob. Thanks so much for the discussion. So on that point on trust, I am kind of focused on building a platform that connects institutional investors to emerging hedge fund managers. And emerging hedge fund managers face a long road of fundraising because building trust with institutions takes a long time. And it's a very slow sale process. And just kind of in your experience, are there any, and you had said that with Airbnb, like Brian is always thinking about the many different ways that he can build trust amongst clients or customers. But yeah, what are some of the common ways that successful businesses have built trust that you would advise early stage founders to?
Your business may be different, but I mean, I'll go through the ones that, I mean, I remember at eBay, we had like a diagram with like the different pillars of trust. Mm-hmm. One was reviews, like a feedback system. I mean, it's very powerful, like Yelp. I mean, that's now the currency of the internet. eBay started it, but Yelp built a business on it, the entire business really on reviews. Amazon built it on reviews. Airbnb, that's a powerful mover in the business. So feedback and reviews are, a fundamental one. Insurance, in other words, am I going to get my money back if something goes wrong? What sort of, is there an independent third party administered insurance program? That can be really powerful. Dispute resolution. What happens when somebody goes wrong? Is there a neutral third party that's going to help resolve the problems here? And some of it can be just the design. So the design and framing of your website can actually help build trust. Escrow, right? There are websites now. I mean, eBay did not move quickly enough, in my mind, to deal with counterfeits and condition items where the condition was bad. And I think some other marketplaces like First Dibs moved into the luxuries market, and they, by taking possession of higher quality items or higher cost goods, or doing investigations into sellers and understanding their supply chain, I think we're able to build trust in ways that that eBay, I think, failed. And I know that take a StubHub that eBay bought. They had issues with big events like Super Bowls, so they actually they actually would rent out a hotel room at a big event and put a body there to actually hand out tickets and check IDs. I think other ways to do it are, like identity verification. What are you doing to make sure that the person who really is who they say they are? Can you check a driver's license online live? Can you do a partnership with a third party, like an Equifax or something, to verify ID? That can be a mover of trust if everyone knows that everybody else is being verified. So one of the reasons you do it is to verify that you are who you say you are. Another reason is by the time you're done with identity verification, you're thinking, okay, I just went through this. That means that everybody else that I'm going to deal with has been through the same thing. So you get a bump of now you trust everybody on the marketplace more because everybody's been through the same thing. even things like verifying email addresses or verifying a phone number by using like a code, right? Where you send a code and you have to type in the code. It verifies contact information and it builds trust because now everybody believes that they're part of a broader network that's done this. So there are a lot of different ways to do it. It depends on the nature of your business. But often you don't see too many marketplaces that rely on a single. You often need multiple, and it'll depend on what you're trying to build.
Thanks.
Awesome. Those are some great examples. And I think, lucky for us, and there's a lot of, identity verification tools and whatnot we can use nowadays.
Yeah, those things didn't exist back then. I mean, back when we were at eBay, I mean, cell phones weren't even, ubiquitous yet. Right. I remember when the Palm Pilot was like the new magic toy, but everybody didn't have a smartphone. You literally couldn't, you couldn't do things the way that you can do now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm sure it was probably interesting. When you built the initial kind of trust and safety team at eBay, did they kind of go on to then lead trust and safety at some other kind of marketplaces and take that experience?
Right. The leaders, I stay in touch with them. The leaders at eBay are now running trust and safety at Facebook and at YouTube. I know, like the general counsel of Google was, the deputy general counsel at eBay. So a lot of the folks that are leaders now at these other marketplaces started at eBay because eBay was the first one. And we made a lot of mistakes, and so those mistakes I think are great lessons that people took with them and have used to help other marketplaces.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's definitely like to see the ecosystem kind of learning and kind of building these tools and services to then kind of help others. Yeah. So cool. Hey, Adam, do you want to jump on?
Hey, Robert, nice to meet you. Thanks for sharing your stories with us. I do have a question. So from what I hear from you, trust, having a mission is super important. That's what drives these marketplace businesses. And, from my standpoint, if I look at, if I shared my resume, it's a success of growing trust and selling to customers and building business, not my own businesses, but through coming up in the corporate world, account manager, sales manager. It's something that's kind of been kicking me in the gut when I'm talking to investors or, other partners is, okay, I don't have the design background. I'm not the one building this. I'm outsourcing it. And I heard from you as well is that, okay, the founders at eBay and the founders at Airbnb, they're designed and they kind of figured out they had the mission. They're that type of individual that was just really focused on doing something great. Mm-hmm. How do I go about either portraying that message that, what we're doing is all about trust and getting the right design people on board, or, getting the VCs or the investors who are willing to, work with someone who's outsourcing that design aspect?
I don't think it's, look, nobody's got everything. I mean, there's no founder that's got a design background, who writes code, who's been to business school and knows the law. Everybody brings different strengths to the table. And I think the key is less about what skills are you personally missing and what kind of a team have you got. In other words, even if it's outsourced, you've got a name, you've got a face, and you can say, look, here's my design guy, not an employee, but this is the guy that does design for me. And this guy's got 15 years experience and does this, that, and the other. So I think I would kind of focus on, even if you're like two guys in a garage, you still, are probably relying on a few other people who are like affiliates or associates or contractors or whatever. And I'd put that group together and in front of investors and say, look, we've got our bases covered here. And by the way, Pierre wasn't a design guy. Pierre did software stuff. He wasn't design. That was just Brian. Brian's background, I think, is actually pretty unique. You don't see that many design people, running major marketplaces. I just would, but I think the fact that he didn't have a business background actually turned out to be a plus. He looked at the world a little differently. So I would kind of wear what I do differently as a badge of, look, this is an advantage. My background is a little different, and that's actually going to help me be successful because I'm looking at the problem in a different way. I know that Brian and Joe, two of the three founders, they're design guys, but I think their different background actually was an asset.
That's really helpful. Let's see. Hey, Tomas, you posted a question in the general chat. You want to jump on and ask?
Hey, how's it going? Good morning. Hey, sorry for having the mask, but you know how things are. Anyways,
the world we live in.
Yeah, yeah. We really appreciate your time, Robert.
Sure.
We are in
I'll
this
practice
together.
safe conversation with you here.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I mean, happy to share. The question I had was more general, and I can provide some specific context as well. The general question is really, definitely hearing, you kind of like really making that drumbeat case for the purpose of trust in a marketplace, and how insurance specifically can be a really powerful tool or mechanism for making that happen. Yeah. And I know that as an early stage marketplace founder, I've looked at different insurance policies that we can be providing to our hosts, and one of the first things that comes up is that they're expensive, or they can be expensive. So the general question is like, what sort of either benchmarks or factors do you generally advise early stage founders to be looking at when considering, policies that can be in the, like, this is like a legal insurance policy versus like an in-house, protection plan type of thing. And to provide this specific context, I'm building a company, early stage marketplace called Simple Surf. Right now, our main service is kind of like Airbnb for surfboards, actually. So we build surfboard lockers on unused beachfront property, open them up for surfers who need a place to leave their boards right by the beach, so they can, for example, get in the water before work, drop off their board, drop off their wetsuit, get to the office without having to lug, an 8-foot wet thing. And
how much unused beachfront property is there? I thought there were houses on all these places. You actually got spots.
Yep. Yeah, so we build them in like backyards, garages, side yards, parking spaces.
Sure, why not? Lock them up.
Yeah.
So I mean, two pieces of advice. One, data. Insurance is nothing but data. So what you need to do is make sure you are collecting data to demonstrate how many boards, how many locations, and how many problems have you had. Because the more data, insurance companies want to see a track record. And the reason it's expensive for you is you don't have much of a track record yet. But, look, in the very, very early days, you're going to have to self-insure and keep your fingers crossed. But the more data you can collect, the more willing an insurance company is going to be to talk to you. Send me a note and connect with me. There's a guy I know who handled insurance. He built the first insurance program at eBay. He then built the insurance program at Airbnb. And I think the last time I talked to him, I know he's helped me. He's advised some early stage marketplaces on how to get insurance. And I think he may even have his own consulting practice all around helping marketplaces get reasonable insurance. And I can connect you to this guy. And I know I just worked with him on a marketplace that I'm advising, and they were really happy. He helped them get an early insurance plan in place. So
amazing.
Anybody on this call, this is not the only time you will ever hear from me again. If you want, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and then just message me and I'll introduce you to, I'm happy to help you guys out. I love marketplaces. So I can introduce you to, one way I can help is introduce you to insurance, somebody for insurance.
Cool. Thank you so much, Robert. Really
You bet.
appreciate it.
Sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the offer because I know pretty much all of us in the group might have a need for that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool, by the way. I live in I've got a house in Santa Cruz, California, which is a big surf.
Yeah. What break are you by?
My backyard, man. Let's talk.
Sounds good.
You might be a new host. So
you never know, man.
That's awesome.
I see surfboards on top of cars and on the back of trucks and stuff all the time. People are always carting them around. I don't live right next to the beach, though, so I really wouldn't work. But I kind of get how that would be something that would be really important to surfers.
That's the idea. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, so you did mention that you were advising some earlier stage marketplaces. So, if you can give an example of, maybe a few of those, and like what in you're just given your incredible background and experience, what makes a marketplace kind of interesting, for you and one that you'd want to work with?
So I'm a marketplace junkie. I mean, so it's like, if it's a marketplace, I'm already kind of like, wow, cool, like surfboards. I love it. One of them I work with now is called Baby Quip. They are they rent baby equipment to families that are traveling. Because if you're a family and you're traveling, you need a crib, you need a stroller, you need diapers, you need baby toys, you need all that kind of stuff, and you can't travel with all that stuff. So they've got hosts that own all the different pieces of baby equipment. And the host will deliver the baby equipment to you at your condo or your Airbnb, and then come pick it up when you're done, and they clean it. And they're doing great. That's one example of one that I work with. I mean, I've worked with, as I said earlier, I worked with Uber a little bit in the early days. I've worked with Turo, Poshmark, Upwork. There's one called Swimply. It's like the Airbnb for swimming pools. I'm helping them out with a friend. They got a lot of interesting trust and safety issues, as you might imagine. So yeah, those are different things, different companies that I work with, just because I like working with founders. I like interesting ideas, and I love marketplaces.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard of Swimply. So yeah, there's definitely some interesting marketplaces out there.
Baby Quip is very cool. That's doing really well. They've got a lot of they've just got booming business with hosts all over the country and in the world. There's another one called Bounce. Some of you may have heard of Bounce. They are storage. So they're a little bit like Tomas's idea, but they partner with businesses that have a little extra storage space. And so if you're a traveler and you've got suitcases, for example, and you need to dump your suitcase for the day, you go onto the Bounce app, find a local storage spot, drop your bags off, and then go pick them up later. So again, interesting insurance issues.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, Fitz, do you want to jump on? You messaged me.
Yeah.
Last question.
Rob, I had one more question, which is for the marketplaces that you advise, what are the first few things that you do when introduced to the company? And sorry, after you've accepted the advisory role.
Well, the first thing I do is I figure out if I want to work with them, and probably number one for me is do I like the founders, because life's too short for me. I don't even care about the money. Fine, I'll make a little bit of money, maybe I won't, but the most important thing is, is this gonna be somebody that I'm gonna have fun working with, and do I believe in their purpose? Right? Is this something that I think is good for the world, that resonates with me personally? And do I? And maybe if they don't have that well articulated, that's one of the first things I'll work with them on, is help them kind of make sure we've got that really tight. And the next thing I do is try to figure out, is this a company that is committed to doing things the right way? And by the right way, I mean, are we gonna build something to last? Are we going to build something that is good for all the stakeholders? Or is this only about trying to make a bunch of money or even a little bit of money? And we sort of got to get an understanding of what are the trust and safety issues you face? What sort of problems have you had? And so, I kind of go through with folks a list of the challenges, particularly the trust and safety related challenges or the legal regulatory challenges. Those are the things that I've had the most experience with. And try to get a sense of how bad each of them are and try to figure out where you're going to take limited resources to try to address them. And then, advise them, like if it's insurance, all right, I can hook you up with somebody who may be able to deal with insurance stuff. If it's regulatory stuff, I might even jump on the phone and talk to a regulator myself. I've done that recently. Or I may say, look, this is what a regulator really cares about. So let's build a good story. Let's invest a little bit in trying to deal with the key issue that regulators are going to work with to kind of take the sting out of any of their arguments that they're going to have. Stuff like that.
Great, that's really helpful.
Cool. So we are almost out of time here, and I just definitely want to be conscious of that. And this is a really incredible chat. Before you wrap it up, though, I did want to, you've had some really incredible experience. So maybe what's one memorable moment? I know you mentioned quite a few in your book that kind of stands out that you could share with us.
Wow. Been a lot. I think it was, well, I'll give you another example. I talked about JARTs. I talked about discrimination at Airbnb. I've talked about some things like that. But I'll give you another example of something that might be another counterintuitive example. So one of the issues that Airbnb faced was a challenge from local government. And, local government was, they're worried about house parties. They're worried about disruptions to neighborhoods. But they're also, frankly, a lot of times very influenced politically by hotels. They've got their hotels are local employers, they're local businesses, and hotels do not like Airbnb, right? And they're showing up in front of the local businesses trying to regulate Airbnb out of existence. So one thing that we did at Airbnb was like, well, what matters to local government? Well, money, right? Taxes. So a lot of marketplaces, their immediate reaction is, man, we don't want anything to do with taxes. Taxes are bad. Taxes, first of all, what a headache of trying to collect taxes. Man, we can't do that. And then taxes are going to add cost. Well, our hosts don't want costs. We don't want more money. Taxes will raise the price of goods. So our guests will hate it, right? So we kind of thought about it and said, you know what? Actually, taxes might be a really good way for us to deal with a bad problem we have with local government. So what we decided to do was we decided to open up our arms and say, you know what? And by the way, taxes are probably the right thing to do. Hotels collect taxes. Why shouldn't Airbnbs pay taxes? So if you're thinking about let's do the right thing. Why shouldn't we pay our fair share? Let's agree that we're going to collect taxes for localities. It's the right thing to do. It's fair. And by the way, once we start doing taxes and collecting taxes, now local government is going to look at us differently. So if you crack down on Airbnb, that means you're actually going to lose tax revenue. That's not so good. And in fact, you might start looking at growing Airbnbs as a way to build your tax base. So, one thing we did fairly early on at Airbnb was we embraced taxes as the right thing to do and something that I think helped local government understand why Airbnb would actually be good for a community and help push back a little bit on, I thought, some really unfair arguments that hotels were trying to push against Airbnb to try to limit their business. So sometimes, you may have to take a counterintuitive approach to a problem and do something that might initially seem like it's a bad idea, but if you're trying to build a business for the long run, it was actually, I think, really the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I remember that time period when that was that kind of out announced and in the media and whatnot. So it's really cool to kind of hear the story from the other side of it.
By the way, it was hard collecting taxes is hard. It's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
But it's the right thing to do. And I think like just about everything, if you do the right thing, then ultimately in the long run, it will be good for your business. Now, you may go through a lot of pain in the meantime, and it may cost you some money to get there, but it may actually be what you really need to do in order to build it out right for the long term.
Definitely. Well, that's a great way to wrap up the chat. So this is definitely this is really incredible. And
anybody reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I do a post about integrity in business, several times a week usually, and welcome hearing from folks, and reach out if I can help anybody.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll include a link to your LinkedIn profile in the community, and then also in the details. So thanks.
And there's a book I'd recommend too. I don't know. Anybody got a copy of it there?
Got it right here. So
that's great. It's I think it's like 16, 17 bucks on eBay. It's unbelievable that you can get so much about marketplaces for only 16 bucks. But I would highly recommend the book if anybody's really interested in this stuff.
We're gonna require it for all community members from now on.
All right, that's great. Love it. All right.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. This is really great.